Good afternoon, everyone. Let's try that again. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Perfect. We are going to go back in time to August 1st, 2012. We work for a company called Knight Capital Group. We are the developers and the operations team that have just developed a new piece of software that's going to go live in the stock market when it opens. Our software actually trades stock in the New York Stock Exchange. So we're having a viewing party because we're so excited about how much money we're going to start making in about 20 seconds when the stock market opens. We've invited our C-level executives, our stakeholders. Everyone's having a really nice party atmosphere. There's pizzas and there's drinking. And this application, in real time, is going to show us exactly how much money we're going to start making. I'm going to let that sink in for a second, because every second we are losing $170,000. $170,000 is being lost every second that our software is running. Clearly, this is not what we wanted to happen. So the devs and the ops come together, and they go and try to figure out what in the world is going on. How are we losing $170,000 every second our software is running? You would think that would be the smart thing to do, but we're going to fix it, right? So we're going to run in and we're going to figure out that of the 8 machines that we have, one of them's doing the wrong thing. So let's start rolling the machines back and get them back to the known good state. Now, guess what? After we fixed it, we have 8 machines doing the wrong thing, all trading in the stock market, losing $170,000 per second. After running for just 1 minute, just 60 seconds, we would have lost over $10,223,000. We tried fixing it for 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, we finally just run in there and we kick over servers. We're pulling plugs out of the walls. We're just stop this system from trading stock. We're literally bleeding money. When the dust settles, they lost $460 million. The saddest thing about this is, first of all, it was 100% avoidable. And it's 100% true. I didn't make up a word of this. This story actually happened. The people that were giggling when I said we work for Knight Capital Group knew this actually happened. Right? You can actually go look this up and see a 28-page bug report of how they lost $460 million in 45 minutes. So my question to you, what would be the impact to your organization? Can you imagine being the poor guy who was reading the documents that said, go click these buttons, go copy these files, and he did it right 7 out of 8 times? One time he made a mistake. Humans make mistakes, right? It's just part of who we are. We make mistakes. So if we can remove humans from that process, hopefully we can remove some of those mistakes. And the product that I'm going to be talking to you today about is a product that could have saved this company $500 million. They're bankrupt. They're gone. They got absorbed by someone else. And that poor guy ruined not only his life, but his entire company's life. So don't be that guy. So now that I have your attention, for those who do not know me, my name is Donovan Brown. I stand before you today as a salesman. My job is to sell you this stuff and convince you how cool it is. And honestly, it is pretty cool stuff. Actually, pretty easy job to sell you stuff that works so well. I blog at donovanbrown.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I talked about Jeffrey Snover earlier. He's a good friend of mine. He was at Build. Right before Build, he tweeted that he had just reached 10,000 followers. Obviously, I gave him his congratulations. I started thinking, man, I want 10,000 followers too. Now, this room isn't as full as last one, but I believe if everyone in this room follows me, I'll catch up. I only need about 9,000 more, right? So everyone who hasn't followed me yet, please go find me and follow me. And I will start making some headway towards that 10,000 number of Jeffrey Snover. And that's the best way to ask me questions, guys. In my demo yesterday, it was cool because I had questions and FAQs on the board. One of the questions that was sent to me via Twitter was one of my questions that I had up there. And the gentleman who actually tweeted that to me was in the audience. So it was really cool for him to come up and say, hey, man, that was my question that you showed everyone about. Because it was actually a really good question. So I read the responses that people send me, and I respond as quickly as I can with blog posts and answers to that stuff. So I'm not just trying to get a lot of people on there. It's actually a valuable resource, I believe, and I try to make it as such. A lot of you guys have been asking me about racing cars. I do race cars. I have a 97 M3, big fan of autocross. and I wrote a website called dlbracing.com that's used here and in Canada for online registration. I am a developer. It's just what I do. I happen to be the 12th best air hockey player in the world, which means there's only 11 people on the planet that can beat me in air hockey. That's not actually true. There's only 11 people that went to the World Championships when I went that could actually beat me in air hockey. There's better players out there, trust me. And actually, matter of fact, we're in Chicago, and the #1 player in the world actually lives here in Chicago. Enough about me. Let's start talking about what we came here to talk about. This session is going to be a lot different than the other one. First few slides are a little similar, but we're going to be talking about using Java development inside of Eclipse, using Team Explorer Everywhere, to deploy to Linux machines. I'm going to say that part again, because again, I read my evals, and at build, someone said, man, I wish that guy would have deployed to Linux machines. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I deployed to 2 of them right in front of you. These are going to be Linux machines. Okay? I'm actually going to putty into both of them, let you see the name of them, and then show you the URL we're pointing at. That was my fault, because clearly, I went back and kind of watched this, and I could see how you could miss that they were actually Linux machines. Do the evals, give us good feedback so that I can make a correction, and you guys will not leave this room thinking I did not deploy to Linux machines. I'm going to make that as obvious as I possibly can. If you're using Linux, we just announced this morning, I believe it was, that DSC is now available on Linux. Prior to that, Chef was the best way to do it. And we partner with Chef very, very well. They have a booth over here inside of our expo. I encourage you to go talk to those guys. They are great guys. Stephen Moraski and I spent a lot of time on the phone getting me prepared for my demo, similar to this one about 6 months ago. And I've been able to use that same knowledge over and over again. Great group of guys. I'll show you how we can use that with release management as well. Team Foundation Server, the tool that I know and love for so long, is not just a .NET product. How many people in here, be honest, thinks that if you're using .NET, you should be using TFS? But if you're using Java, you should not. That's what I thought, right? I'm going to be using Java, and I'm going to be using Team Foundation Server to do my version control, to do my branching and merging, to do my work item tracking, to do my test case management, to do my automated build, to do my release, and even monitor it in production. It does not have to be a .NET product to be used with Team Foundation Server. It can be mobile development. I could be going to Android. I could be going to iOS. I can be going to Windows Phone. I can be going to IoT. I could be going to Arduino. I could be going to Raspberry Pi. No matter what technology you're developing in, no matter what platform you are targeting, Team Foundation Server, release management, and our build system has value for you. And you're going to see our build system has never been easier to use in that cross-platform world should you need it. Okay? All code created equal. Any Power Builder guys out there? A couple of you guys? You can use Team Foundation Server. I've set it up myself. Any Visual Fortran guys out there? Did anyone even know there was Visual Fortran? I only know there's Visual Fortran because I was handed a disk saying you have to be able to build this too. I'm like, what? I didn't even know there was such a thing. I was able to build it though. Our system has been really, really flexible for a very long time. So I want to make sure you know that. What I'm talking about is something called Team Foundation Server. We've had it for a long time. One of my biggest pet peeves is anyone that tells me that Team Foundation Server is the next version of VSS. It is not the next version of VSS. Yes, it has source control, but it is not the next version of VSS. It is a drastically different product that also has all the other things I rattled off a moment ago. Work item tracking. You guys are probably using, I don't know, Jira, or some Atlassian tool for that. We actually have that built in. Test case management. You might be using something like Quality Center or some other tool for that. We have that installed as well. You want to do bug tracking. You want to do your automated testing, your automated build, your project planning, your agile planning, you name it. It's actually built inside a Team Foundation Server. So if you have TFS and an MSDN license and you're paying for any of those other tools, you're literally paying for them twice. All right? So I'd highly investigate, can we use the tools that we've already paid for and we already have in our infrastructure before we go out and buy something else? And what's really nice about our tool set is they all talk to each other right out of the box. When you buy one piece from one company and one piece from another company, now it's your job to figure out how to make them talk. Some do it well, some not so well. And we do it immediately right out of the box. This Team Foundation Server you install on premise. If you don't want to install it, we'll take care of that for you as well. VSO, it's available for free. Anyone can go to visualstudio.com right now and have us spin up a Team Foundation Server for you in the cloud. Anyone. If you have you can have up to 5 of your buddies join you in that project for absolutely nothing. Source control, everything else that I just mentioned. If you guys all have MSDN, then you can have an infinite number of people as long as they also have MSDN inside of your Team Foundation Server for you, completely for free. It's 5 people who do not have an MSDN. Okay? Good question. I am still a sales guy, so if you have some licensing questions, I can actually answer some of those for you as well. So, enterprise. This is an enterprise-grade tool. We allow you to actually integrate with Team Foundation Server from inside of Visual Studio. If you are a Visual Studio developer, life is grand. We have the tightest integration, as we clearly should. But not everyone develops in .NET. Some people are Java developers. We understand that. It is a new age for Microsoft where we try to play nice with as many people as we possibly can. We have Azure. In Azure, we have Linux. We allow you to... Who saw the build keynote where we say we're going to let you compile Objective-C inside of Visual Studio, right? So we're trying our best to be where you are so that you can utilize the best tools that you have in the market. IntelliJ is another very popular IDE for Java development. It has TFS integration right out of the box. And as I said, the Power Builder, the VB6, the SQL Server guys, we haven't forgot about you either. We have a way for you to use all the power that is Team Foundation Server directly inside of your IDE. Release management, the star of the show, the reason that we are all here, the automation component, allows us to deploy to both Windows and to Linux. I need to update this slide because until yesterday, that Linux was a preview for us to have PowerShell, but it was just announced today that it's no longer in preview. You can actually do it. Today we're going to be using Chef, but we also have plans to be working with Docker, and we have plans to working with people like Puppet as well. So whatever infrastructure you have in place today, you'll be able to utilize that infrastructure tomorrow. But what is release management actually trying to automate? It's trying to automate everything. We don't want human beings doing anything if we can help it. We don't want them provisioning our machines. We don't want them clicking on next and trying to install Windows services. We want all that stuff installed for us. We want to make sure that our applications are deployed successfully. We want to make sure that those pesky web.configs, I ask this every time, ASP.NET developers, raise your hand. ASP.NET developers that have been burned out by a web.config, raise your hand. Everybody put your hands back up. Right? Because you've all been burned by a web.config. And it's not just a web.config. It's any text file that needs to have values that are different in one environment than another can use tokenization, and we can actually modify them for you from one environment to the next. Right? That's one of my biggest and favorite features of release management. We can run automated tests. I will be doing that today. I will be running Selenium tests for those who already like and use Selenium. I will also be running coded UI tests, one of my pet features of Visual Studio. I have two different pipelines, one for dev and one for QA. We're going to be doing Selenium in one and coded UI in another just because I can, not because I would suggest that as a best practice. We also can pause at any point, wait for approvals, and allow you to run all the manual tests that you want against that environment. Then have your QA lead give us a thumbs up when he's happy, and then we will promote your code to the next stage of your pipeline. In addition to that, throughout the entire pipeline, we're giving you notifications to those who care, and we're waiting for approvals with those the authority to move our code from one environment to the next. How does it work? Very quickly, most of you guys already know me, so you've already seen this slide. In the center of the world is an RM server. It is where all your configuration information lives. What components you want to deploy, what environments you want to deploy to, and what we are able to do is initiate a release. A release can come from an individual, as it is here in this animation, or it could also come from a build. Our build system talks to our RM system. Like I was saying before, you use all of our stuff, it automatically talks to each other. When the build finishes, it can basically hand the baton off to our release system. It says, there's some zeros and ones over here I need you to now deploy through our pipeline and do all the magic that they've asked you to do with those zeros and ones. Let's let build do build, and let's let release do release. Let's not bastardize build and try to make it do release. That's not what it's designed for. So once we get that catalyst, what we're going to do with our server is going to get all of what we call components, and we're changing that word to artifacts, which are just the parts of your application that need to be deployed and configured in your environment. We then take that information and we deploy it to the appropriate machines. You can see from my icons, those machines are not all Windows machines. We also support Linux. We also support Azure. You can go to AWS if you insist. You can also go to Google Cloud or wherever you want to. As long as I can see or touch that machine, I can deploy to it. It can be on-prem or it can be in the cloud as well. This is Chef from a high level. Right? Chef is a piece of software or technology that allows us to register nodes, what we call bootstrapping a node. It can be a Windows machine or a Linux machine. In our case, it's going to be two Linux machines. And what those Linux machines do is they now register themselves with the server. I'm able then to be able to communicate with the Chef server from release management so that we can do all the Chef-y stuff we want to do in Chef and not have to duplicate any of that work inside of RM, yet be able to use that infrastructure and use those items as part of our pipeline. Right? We want to be dry, right? Just do it once. You don't want to repeat yourself. Just go over here, set up your chef environment, tell us where your chef environment is. We'll poke the tires of that chef environment when it's time for it to do something. It'll wake up, do all of its magic, and then we'll get back reported status throughout our entire pipeline. Camera's out. I have a gift for you. Take a picture. This gives you 4 hours of free Wintellect Now. If you were in my other session, it's the same one. If you're in my other session and you follow me on Twitter, send me a note, and I'll send you another one of these I have. That might be able to give you a little bit more Wintellect Now. Everyone take a picture? Good, good, good. If not, these slides are going to be available, and this slide will be in it, so you'll be able to get it from there. Unlike my other one, this one actually has a demo. Most of the people who've ever seen me before know this is what we want to come and see. My demos are pretty elaborate, they're pretty risky, and that makes them fun. But it also shows that we can do a lot of cool stuff with our technology, right? They can either go really, really well, or they can go really, really bad. Either way, you want to be here to see it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over and look at the environment that we are going to go play with now. So let me switch over here if I can. This is the application. It's a very simple application. Now you're thinking to yourself, I thought you said it was a Java application. This is clearly a file new project MVC application. It is, but it is all done in Java. I was too lazy to write my own HTML and write my own style sheets, so I just did file new, copied all the HTML and style sheets, and put it inside of my Java application. And I will prove to you that this is all Java. Step number 1, based on the feedback that I got before, prove that this is actually running in Linux. So let's come up here and look at this. This one right here. It says DLB demo dev, cloudnet.net. All right, so let's come over here to this putty session. Where are you? Here. This is one of my nodes, and this is my other ones. So this one right here is clearly in Ubuntu 14.04. This one right here is in Ubuntu 14.10, I believe. I think this is a newer version. All right. Everyone believe me that these are Linux servers? Good. So I want to make sure that everyone is clear that these are Linux boxes. I'm going to go ahead and get off these Linux boxes. In the background there, I just put this one up because this is my agent machine. Your agent will not be a console window. These are preview bits. We're trying to do a lot of diagnostics. I have my running interactively. But what's cool here is I hope that I'm going to be able to position my window such that when my coded UI test and my Selenium test runs, you'll see the browsers pop up in the background. So you'll be able to see that they're actually running. I'll be able to prove that they run because I'll show you the output of the test results and how they integrate inside of our new user interface. We allow you, with our new build and our new test and our new release management, to manage your entire pipeline through one pane of glass, your web browser. In the past, to do this demo, I would take you inside of Visual Studio for a moment. I would take you to the website for a moment. I would take you inside Microsoft Test Manager for a moment. I would take you inside the release management client for a moment. And I'd have to go through 4 different tools of TFS to show you the pipeline. Right? That's obviously not the best experience for the user. So what we do now is we surface all of that for you in one web browser. So once I check in the code, I never have to go back to another tool to be able to monitor this entire movement of the code. So what are we going to try to do, though? It is a Java application, but it relies upon a .NET backend. So the reason that this actually came to be is I was doing a customer visit, and the customer was a really heavy Java shop who actually deployed to Linux and just dismissed Microsoft outright. It's like, okay, we're doing Java and Linux. Microsoft has no business here. And we said, no, please let us come and show you what we actually can do in that environment. So I created an environment that had a Java component and a .NET component, making it a little bit more complicated, saying, if your team is doing a part here and a part there, I want to track that work all together. I don't want to have a Java project and then a .NET project with different work items and different bugs and different tasks that actually is the same solution. They need to be tracked together. They need to be prioritized together. They need to be built, deployed, and tested together because they make up one system. So this is the front end that is in Java. But when I go to the About page, this text right here, this is actually being sent from a web service written in .NET. So the text itself is actually being sent across the wire. When I say, tell me what I should be saying on the About page, I'm making a request to a web service. That web service is then sending me this information back. The URL that I'm using, as you'll see down here, is this one. So this is where I'm pointing at. So I have a web service for the About page. I also have a web service for the contact page. Now, if you'll notice, it says build WS01 dev. I have an Azure website, a PaaS website, with a dev and a QA deployment slots. People familiar with the deployment slots? A couple of you guys? Deployment slots allow me to have a zero downtime deployment. I can actually deploy to the dev slot while my QA and my production slots are completely uninterrupted. All the traffic to those guys stays 100% 200s, right? They're all 200 responses. Everyone's happy. I take all the time I need to copy to my deployment slot while no one's using it. And then when I'm ready, I literally flip a button and it will swap dev and QA immediately. Zero downtime. So what I normally do is I have a staging slot that no one can see. I deploy my code to the staging slot. I'll run tests against that staging slot. And when it's past my smoke test, in a moment's notice, I just flip it to production. Should something bad happen, or oh my God, we didn't test something right, or that real production data doesn't play nice with our new validation rules and stuff happens badly, I can flip it back again. And instantly, I have what was used to be in production back in production. So deployment slots allow you a way to also do A/B testing. Maybe I want 1% of my traffic to go to this other slot, while the other 99% goes to this one slot. Let me analyze how people are actually utilizing that new features that they see in that 1%. Right? So it's a really cool feature. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be deploying to one and then swapping to the other, just to show you that the mechanism happens. But if you remember what I said yesterday, don't do what I'm about to show you here. This is just for demo purposes. You would never swap from dev to QA. Right? Because if you do so, you're going to be leaving dev in a bad scenario, right? So I had a best practices slide on exactly how to use these. I'm just using them here to prove that we can actually do it. So here is my dev, and this is my QA, as we'll come up here very quickly. As you can see, this one is pointing to DLB chef node. And if I click on about here, as you can see here, it says the same wrong text, and it also goes to somewhere else. The other one went to dev, and this one goes to QA. This is the other slot. How many of you guys are agile? Or wish you were agile, or trying to become agile? Scrum or fall and all that good stuff. You're kind of some type of hybrid. Cool, understood. So what we're going to do today is we're going to pretend that we are an actual Scrum team. And I am a huge agilist. I am a big fan of Scrum. I protect it very dearly. And I go and I help teams, or I used to in my old job, kicking and screaming from the waterfall world into this more agile way of doing software. Benefits of agile, you deliver software more quickly. Right? That's the bottom line. That's what we're trying to do. And if we can get it in front of the people sooner, they can tell us if we're going in the right direction or not. And if we're not, we can waste a week versus wasting 6 months and go ahead and make a course correction. So what we are doing right now is we are in our sprint review with our product owner saying, this is what we were able to produce in the first sprint. And he looks around and says, guys, this is a good start, but what I really want you guys to do is to change this text. I not only want you to change what it says, I also want you to change the size of the text. Now, this now affects both of our teams. The .NET team has to change what it says, and the Java team has to change how it's represented. So I have to build both the .NET side, and I have to build the Java side to show what the user wants us to show. And we have to deploy both the Java side and the .NET side simultaneously. Because if I don't, then my automated tests that I'm going to run are going to fail, because it won't find the text or it'll be the wrong size, right? So what I'm going to show you is how easy it was for me to be able to build both Java and .NET, be able to deploy both Java and .NET to Windows and to Linux, and then run automated tests, be it Selenium or Coded UI, against this application. All right? You guys ready to see that? All right, let's try that again. You guys ready to see that? Yes! All right, cool. So let's go figure out how this stuff actually works together. So this is our new build system. And it's completely task-based. How many people hate the XAML builds? Everyone raising their hand is not a consultant. Because consultants love the XAML build. It was so complicated, we made mountains of money off of it, right? Because no one could do it themselves. But we made it a lot easier because we heard the pain points. And even me as a consultant, I really did not love it. I just knew how to make it do a lot of cool stuff. And what we have is all these cool tasks that you can run. But before we go into that, let me go ahead and talk about checking this stuff in. Remember I talked about we can do everything we want to from Eclipse as well. So this is Eclipse. This is a pure Java application. And at the bottom there, you see a highlighted bit of text. That text does not match the URLs I just showed you guys on the About pages. That has to be changed for every environment. If this is the file that I was using, I would get a server error, because it clearly would not be able to reach localhost from within my Azure environment. So I just wanted to show you that tokenization I was talking about, those values that you have that need to be different in every environment, we're going to be able to handle those for you. And this is an example of a value that has to be different in dev than it is in QA, than it is in production. Because if I use that value, then nothing is actually going to work. We can use tokenization, but what I was doing again, as I worked with the chef guys, and there's a chef way of fixing this. And that is a value that is on the Linux machines. So you can use our techniques, or if you're already a chef shop, you can use the chef techniques. And that's exactly what we're doing. So I'll show you where we're passing along the values we want replaced there so that they can actually be used in the chef environment. On the right-hand side here, we have something called Team Explorer, or to be more specifically, because we're inside of a Eclipse IDE, this is Team Explorer everywhere. It runs everywhere, right? It runs on Linux, it runs on Mac, it runs on Windows. Anywhere you can run Eclipse, you can run this plugin. It will give you access to your source control. It will give you access to your work item tracking, your automated build, the whole 9 yards. Like any good cooking show, I've already done the cooking. I've made the modifications necessary to change the text and the textual representation, and all I'm doing here is getting ready to check that in. At the bottom, you see there it says number 1, change text. That is a work item. This work item here, let me go ahead and zoom in there so you know what I'm talking about. And my screen is not wanting to fit everywhere. That right there, that is a work item. That text right here, this is what I'm talking about. What this was is that I'm sitting in my sprint review. My product owner says, hey, I want the text to be different. So I was able to go inside of TFS and say, let's add a work item that says change the text. And I don't want to go through all that stuff because we're talking about RM, but I was able to flesh out exactly what that meant, who was responsible, what teams were going to be involved. And now I'm able to associate that to this check-in. By associating it to the check-in, it will then be associated to the release. Now we have traceability from the code change, why I made it, what requirement we were trying to satisfy, into what release it is inside of our environment. Right? We get full traceability throughout the system by simply adding that item to this particular check-in. So let's go ahead and check this in. We have a concept called continuous integration. We also have one called continuous delivery. Continuous integration is when I check in code and a build is triggered in the backend automatically for me. Continuous deployment is when that build that was triggered actually will then trigger the release for me as well. So hopefully this is going to check in here in just a second. It's funny, at build it did the exact same thing. This took a lot longer than it should have. But don't worry, it worked at build, so fingers crossed. That'll go away here in just a second. And when it does, what's going to happen is our build is going to kick off. And when our build kicks off, we're going to be able to build the Java and the .NET side by side. So ask me a question real quick, because I don't want to go away from the screen until I actually see that trigger. So are there any questions so far? We're going to hand. Oh, there's a microphone right in front of you. Please say it right there in the microphone.
So you mentioned with Team Explorer Anywhere that'll run on Java and Linux. Does it run in other IDEs besides Eclipse, like IntelliJ?
IntelliJ has its own integration, right? So IntelliJ, perfect. So IntelliJ already has its own integration with Team Foundation Server. It will run in any derivative of Eclipse, however. So something like Code Warrior, which is used for some really low-level microprocessor stuff, is actually a derivative of this, and I was able to install it directly in there. So it doesn't have to be Eclipse proper. It can just be in a derivative of Eclipse. It'll still be able to run Team Explorer everywhere on Linux, Mac, or Unix, whatever. Wherever you can run Eclipse, you can run this. IntelliJ has its own plugin. Great question. Okay, so now our build should be running, and we can go back in and double-check that. So now we're going to be here inside of our web browser. And let me go and see if this guy got queued up correctly. Perfect. So we have a build that's running. And what does this guy actually look like? If we go and edit it, we basically just have a series of tasks that we want to be able to execute through our build. I literally just said, I would like to build Maven. So I added a new build step. There happens to be one here for Maven. And then I told it where my POM file was. If I had an Ant script, I would be able to say I want to build Ant, and I would be able to build it with Ant. What's really interesting about our build agent is that you can install it on a Linux machine or on a Mac. Right? It does, even though it's a Team Foundation Server build agent, it doesn't have to run on a Windows machine. Mine happened to be. Builds the Java just fine. But I did meet a customer who was adamant that his JDK was better because it ran on Linux. And now I don't care. I'm like, fine, then install our build agent on Linux and use it as your pool, and we'll build your Linux stuff on your Linux machine, and we'll build your .NET stuff anywhere else you'd like us to build that as well. So our agent runs everywhere. You will be able to extend this task list of items that you want to be able to build. And as you can see, we even go into iOS and things like that. Chris Patterson, the product owner, or sorry, the project manager for Build, did a fantastic demo here. So you can look that up. So I will not belabor this point, but our build system is highly more flexible than it's ever been in the past. And it actually is the same engine that underlines our release management. So the agent that we use for Build is actually the exact same agent that we use for our release management server as well. So what I'm going to try to do here is kind of move my browser over a little bit if I can. What you'll be able to see in the backside here, That is the agent running. So every once in a while, you're going to see some text go scrolling by. And if I were to go and look at the output of our build, if you ever dealt with our build system before, you might know that sometimes it's hard to find the logs that you're actually looking for. So let's go back. Actually, we already passed that. We're actually into our release already. So from here, we can see, not only did I run my JUnit test, I actually ran my .NET unit test as well. My Java team's a good Java team. They actually went and they wrote some JUnit test. And when we built their Maven and their POM file, we ran their JUnit test, and we have the output of those JUnit tests here right alongside the .NET unit test we ran as well. Again, it's this one family, one tool set. I don't care what technology you are. You can mix and match it. And if I click on this, what you'll see is I'll be able to see inside the same pane of glass. Historically, I would have had to take you somewhere else to see the test results. But here, right here inside the web browser, I effortlessly moved from our release hub to our test hub to show you this information. Right? It's that single pane of glass that allows you to see everything from build to test to release all in one area. No more jumping from tool to tool. So this is obviously my JUnit stuff, but if I wanted to go back here, I would also be able to show you what I ran from the .NET side, because my .NET team also wrote unit test as well. So I can run my unit test during my build, and then I can go and run my coded UI and my load test during my release. Our release should already be in flight, so let's go and talk about that guy as well. So this is the new release management. How many of you guys are using the old gray fat client? You have my apologies, right? It's heavy, it's thick, it's slow, and it's a pain to have to install it to start building out your pipeline. I'm at my desk, I want to go build my pipeline, or better yet, I'm at your desk and I want to go monitor the pipeline. I don't want to have to install a tool to do so, and you no longer have to do that. Simply come here and you'll be able to see all of the different releases that you currently have in flight, exactly what version of each release is in each environment, and then be able to drill down into those releases to get more information. So it's a much cleaner user interface. It allows us to be able to go and look at the details of what's actually happening. And just like I did when I was creating my build definition, it's the same way that it looks like when we build what we call a release definition. The only difference is the task that we're actually going to be running. In this list, you see that we want to, what are we doing first? We're deploying an Azure website. On the right-hand side, it allows us to quickly create enter all the parameters necessary to do that. So I have an internal consumption Azure account that I have access to, and that is the Azure account that I'm going to actually stand up my website in. Instead of me having to remember what that certificate is and the username and password, I get to establish a relationship or a connection between RM and my Azure account, or multiple Azure accounts, and be able to simply select from this drop-down which one I want it to use. Same is true when I do things with Azure PowerShell. I simply have to tell it which one I want to use, tell it where in the world I would like to have my website created, and then tell it the name of the website to which I want to deploy to. The dev in parentheses is the way that slots are identified for my Azure websites. I'm telling it right now, I want to copy files from my drop location onto the dev slot of my website. And I will never have to copy them again if I don't want to, because I'm going to simply swap from dev to QA after my test actually passed. So if you keep your eye on that screen in the background, you might actually see Chrome fire up really quickly. I've noticed that the Selenium tests are extremely fast. So if you blink, you literally could miss the web browser coming up. But I'll have proof that it actually worked. We're actually copying to blob storage. Obviously, we own Azure. We're big fans of cloud computing. And we have the ability for you to actually push information into the cloud very easily. Not only from IaaS or PaaS, but even when you're trying to deal with cloud services, trying to deal with blob storage or table storage, SQL Azure, whatever you want to, we have the ability to help you deploy to and store information in Azure. So what we're doing here is we're taking the Java application, which would be very difficult to get to the Linux machine, and we're just uploading it into blob storage. When we run the cookbook and the recipes on the Linux machines through Chef, we're really simply going to go and grab that information from blob storage and pull it down onto the machines inside of the Linux world, copying it into our Tomcat directory. And then we're going to be able to use Linux and the Chef to modify that file to make sure it points at the right locations, so that when I go back and I run my dev slot, it says something different and it's a different size. So that's our goal there. And that's what I'm doing with our next task here called Chef. Just like I did with Azure, I have the ability with Chef to actually create a permanent connection between my release management server and my Chef server. If I click on Manage here, it'll take me to a user interface that I can use to be able to manage those connections. Today we support Azure and we support Chef as first-class citizens. Everything else is now what we call generic, but I've already seen demos of this with Jenkins as well. If you're using Jenkins, you don't have to stop using it. I tell everybody that Team Foundation Server is better together. That means if you use every single piece of our framework, it works the best. But every single piece of our framework is also pluggable. So if you don't want to use our build system and you don't want to use our source control system, you can still use Subversion, you can still use Jenkins, and you can still use release management. Right? You don't have to give up release management because you didn't elect to use some of the other tools that come out of the box with Team Foundation Server. Of course, your life would be a lot easier if you did, but a lot of people already have investments in tools, and it'd be very difficult to get those tools out of there. Don't think that that means you can't use some of the tools that we have at Microsoft and in TFS. Once I make my connection, I would then be able to go back in and finish building out my pipeline. So let's see what's going on in the background here. Uh-oh, looks like I got an error. Dun, dun, dun. So it says that my Chef server is unavailable. Let's go back in and verify that. So this is my Chef server here. And what we will do if we need to is we'll simply restart that particular stage. So let's go back and see. This guy is actually not showing up. So now I get to blame Chef and not us. This is not our fault. Well, the shift in which we are relying upon is not working right now. All right, now look at that 13 days, 2 minutes ago. Let's go back and look at the status. This is what we're supposed to be doing with this tool anyway, so we can go back in and see exactly what went wrong. As we can see, we have a red bar here. This red bar is letting me know that something drastic actually happened here. We got rejected. It allows me very quickly to see how many of the tasks actually succeeded or did not succeed. So 3 of the 5 is how far we got. And now what we can do is we can go down and see more information here and see exactly what failed. As we can see, we failed to actually use the chef. The chef deployment actually failed. I talked all that good stuff about those guys too. So let's see. What we can do is we can download the log file here and get some idea of exactly what's going on. So as we can see, our recipe failed to run. I think it was simply a timeout issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart this stage, hopefully, and we're going to be able to get this kick-started and start moving along a little bit forward here as well. So I wanted to show you, and this is actually a good segue, that we give you all the information that you need should something bad happen to be able to go back in and troubleshoot that information as well. We don't try to obfuscate or hide any of it from you. One of the things that I should be able to do here, when I go back to my particular stage, let's go back here, is basically try to restart this guy. That's not what I want. Give me 1 second. All right, so we should be able to go ahead and restart. And if Chef plays nicely, we should be able to go ahead and get past that stage that we got before. So since this has to rerun, my timing is a little bit thrown off, so this is a perfect time for questions. So we're going to go ahead and call another audible. Anyone have a question over what we've seen so far?
Under the tasks, I didn't see one for like deploying to an Azure VM with PowerShell DSC.
Okay, so let's go back in and look at some of those things. Not all the tasks are there yet because we are in preview, but we do have a lot of tasks that allow you to do a lot of cool stuff. So let's see what's in our inventory here. And VJ, we have the honor of having VJ in the audience with us as well. He is the program manager for this particular product. And if at any point, VJ, you want to go ahead and speak up, you feel more than welcome. Is there actually a DSC task in the list today? Under utilities, or which one is it going to be? Under deploy, where is desired state? IC PowerShell, Docker, run PowerShell on target machine. We would actually be able to use this one to run the DSC. Right? So, and also you got to remember, DSC doesn't have to be run on the target machine as well, right? You can have your workstation and then trigger it from there. So as long as you have your DSC script, your PowerShell written to do the start DSC, then we're going to be able to run that arbitrary for you as well. Now, we could come up with a task that's a little bit more DSC specific if we wanted to, very similar to the one that we have today in our vNext product. But again, you got to remember, everything that you're seeing right now is all preview bits, so there's still a lot of usability that we're going to be coming up with, but that's a great, great feedback. So VJ and I will take that back with us. Now let's see if we can get this guy to start kicking in something in the background. I see some work happening, but we hopefully... Oh, good question. So the question is, how did I get it to restart where it failed, right? How did I get it to pick up that last stage? Well, if we go back and we look at the movement of the bits, let's go back and look at that status here. We'll go back to Explorer, and I'm going to drill down into this particular item. There was a restart right here. And there's also a restart, if I drill down even further, right here. So because it had failed, it knew exactly where it needed to restart, and it allowed me to restart that stage and try it again. It knows exactly what, for example, Dev and QA are 2 different stages, which I can restart at any point if it fails. So it's going to replay the entire thing. Not just the one item. That's why I see that's a good question. Not just the one item that failed in pickup. It's literally replaying from the beginning. Gotcha. No. It's really running the entire thing, which is why the best practice we talked about deployment slots yesterday was if this thing swapped and I restarted it, it would simply swap it again, and we would not be where we expected to be after we restarted it. You'd have to restart it yet a third time for it to finally swap what you really wanted into production, which is why you never swap across stages. So what I want to do is, even in my QA stage, it would be to copy to a staging environment and then swap it. That way, if I ever had to restart it, I would be copying the same bits to the staging environment and swap it and always get the same output, right? Never swap against stages, because if you do, you'll get the scenario that we're worried about here. So hopefully Chef will do what it's supposed to do here. And what we're actually doing at this point is we're what we call poking the node, right? So what we've done, and let me show you that real quick while this is running in the background. If we go and look at the anatomy of that Chef node, of the task itself, so let's go back and look at that. I have to tell it where should I be pointing that properties file to, right? Where should it point so that you actually are pointing to the right place in dev and the right place in QA? Inside of Chef, I can define something called environments, just like we can in other systems. And those environments have variables, or what we call attributes. And what I'm able to do is pass those attributes to the environment so that all the nodes that are registered to that environment can then read those attributes. What I'm doing from inside of release management is I'm passing it the values that I want it to have. And then I'm basically poking the node and saying, hey, man, go ask Chef for your new information. And then it'll wake up, go grab that information, and apply it. One of the things it's told to do is update that properties file and to copy the new versions of the files from blob storage. All right, so that's what it's supposed to be doing for us. And if that works successfully, the next thing it's going to do is simply run our Selenium test. Running Selenium tests, running coded UI tests, it's exactly the same process for me. It just all depends on what it was that I built inside of Visual Studio. Visual Studio builds a DLL that has the binaries necessary to run your test, be it Selenium or coded UI, and all we do is load that DLL and run it. How many of you are running coded UI tests with our current system? Brave souls. You had to create a test plan, you had to create a test case, you had to automate it, you had to then create a standard environment, you had to figure out where all the little keys and numbers were. You know what I had to do here? I had to say, go run my coded UI test. I did none of that other stuff, right? So it makes life a lot easier when you want to start running automated tests. You don't have to set up any of that stuff to even run coded UI test. My agent happens to have Visual Studio on it. So I can do my compilation, and it also has the intelligence necessary to run my test. So instead of setting up this huge infrastructure so I can run one freaking test, I simply say, there's my test, just go run it, and it'll be able to run it for me. We're making progress here. So at this point, that is Selenium in the background firing up Chrome to actually test our application and ensure that it was actually deployed successfully, right? And now hopefully it'll say everyone's happy. And what we're going to do now is get what we call a notification. Let me show you how you set those things up. When you build an environment, you actually get to select who the approvers are. I automated the in and the out, basically the inbound approval and the outbound approval of this stage. I just left checked as automated, which means the system won't stop or pause or wait for anyone. It just says, as soon as the build is done, I'm going to start deploying this, running the test, and then I'm going to race myself into the QA environment. But we don't have to worry about the QA environment being trounced accidentally, because that environment is different. If we were to go back here and look at QA, I actually assigned people to be the approvers for that stage. So before anything is touched, it says, hey, Donovan, we have a build for you. Do you want it or not? And my environment is completely pristine. It is untouched at that point. And then I get to say yes or no, and you'll see exactly how I can do that through the user interface. If I say no, everything stops in its tracks, and my environment is safe. I can also go and defer it. I can say, yes, I want those bits, but I'm in the middle of a 2-week QA cycle. And if you give them to me today, it invalidates all of my test results. I still need to get the current version that's in QA out into production, so I can't tamper with it today. I can say, I want it, but I want you to wake up next week at 5 o'clock and deploy it then. Right? So I don't have to remember next week to come and say it's okay. I can do it today, and it'll actually figure out when it needs to wake up and deploy my bits for me. This can be not only a user, but it can also be a group, and it can also be more than one user. Right? Sometimes you have several people who have to give it a thumbs up before it can enter or leave a stage. You simply add all those users here, and they will be able to come in and approve it. You do not have to be licensed to be an approver, so anyone in your organization can be an approver. We have a question. What is that used for, VJ? I've never asked you that. The environment owner, what power does that person actually have?
So he will get notifications when it passes
So the owner of the environment gets all the notifications regardless, right? Okay. It's almost like the guy that was in the middle of the deployment slot of the old system. All right, makes sense. One more question. That's another good question. That's one I haven't had a chance to ask you, VJ. So the question is, and I've got asked this at the booth as well, what is going to be the API that we're going to be able to exploit, not only for triggering and releasing, but status and reporting that's coming out of the next version? Okay, do me a favor, VJ. Can you run to this mic real quick? Because I have a feeling this will be a longer answer than we're expecting to want to repeat. While he's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and do some. Now I'll wait and do the approval after. I think I have enough time. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the new stuff is based on REST APIs. So if you were using the old stuff, it was not based on REST APIs. But this entire web client is talking to the release management service using REST APIs. And these REST APIs are exactly consistent with the rest of the TFS REST APIs as well. So you should be able to, we'll publish all the REST APIs here.
Perfect. So that answer the question? Perfect. We had a young lady has a question here.
Yeah, notifications.
Yes?
Instead of being just one person, can it be like a group of people?
Absolutely.
Someone is out of the office, it can be anyone.
That's exactly how groups work. Yeah, so instead of putting an individual's name there, I would just put a group there. And that group, everyone in the group would get an email, and the first one who responds to it will be able to approve it. Fantastic question. All right, got a couple more. You.
Mentioned this simplification for the coded UI test.
Yes.
You're still running interactive, and we are dealing unfortunately with the lab management right now. Do we have any word on what's the future? What are the enhancements to expect?
You still won't have to run in. Do you still have to run in interactive mode for our coded UI? So the answer is yes. Your agent will run somewhat very similar to this one, to where you're actually going to be able to see it so it can interact with the user interface. But I don't really think that's an RM issue. That's a technology issue with the way that coded UI works, right? We've never been able to do it from a Windows service because no Windows service, well, there is a bit in the Windows service you can actually set. This is I want to interact with it. It just makes things a lot more complicated. One more.
Is there some sort of timeout on the notification that you need to respect before you hit delay or anything like that?
You're asking, so I've gotten a notification. Is there any timeout that the system will say, okay, he hasn't responded in a day, so I want to go ahead and fail this? No, you will have a pipeline of all of the notifications that you have yet to adhere to. And then you just can go in and skip them if you want to as well. Because this was something that just got asked to me. It says, Donovan, we have our QA, and they don't always want every build, but now they have like 5 of them in a row. What are they supposed to do with those other 4? I'm like, just abandon them. Right? Because that 5th build has all of the changes from the other 4 in it as well. You don't have to take them in sequence if you've already gotten to a point to where like, man, I'm really behind. Let's just go ahead and reject or abandon those 4. This is the 5th one that I want. Right? So when they get there, they're going to have a backlog of, you just want to be diligent. Right? We sent you a notification because you're the guy who's supposed to go do something, and you're just sitting on it. Right? So that, to me, that's more of a process issue than a tool issue. Because that build shouldn't be rejected just because I'm taking a long time to respond to it. The build could be completely valid. I'm just busy. One more. Okay, this is the last one on this one, and then we'll keep moving.
With that, you were just talking about there with the multiple builds stacking up. Currently, you have to go into each one and abandon each one. Is there a way to mass abandon?
I don't think there's any batch abandonment today, but you could also just keep them in progress if you're in a hurry, right? So you don't have to. That's a kind of good question. I think I can see there's 2 questions in there you might not even meant to ask the other one, which is, do I have to abandon or reject them before I can accept the 5th one? The answer is no. Right? You can skip line and say, that's the one that I want, and you don't have to do anything to the ones in between. They'll just basically be in progress forever. But that might be some good value add, right? We might need to put some checkboxes on there so that you can do a batch rejection or abandonment. But I'm kind of scratching my head on that because it's the same pipeline, right? And if I'm restarting all of them, then literally we're going to be trouncing each other, right? So there's going to be some thought that's going to have to go into that. Rejecting, I can see okay, but restarting or something like that might be a little bit more dangerous. So at this point, if we were to go and look at our output here, everything here looks like it is still looking good. So what we can see here, and I want to go back to my releases, is we give you the ability to be able to quickly see from lots of different angles if I have an approval pending. In the old system, you would have to go to a specific page of the FAT client to be able to do your approvals. And sometimes it could be cumbersome trying to navigate the old user interface. What we allow you to do now is right here on this screen be able to see that there is an approval pending by that particular icon. And should I choose to, I can actually approve it right now. So I can simply click on this icon, give it an approval statement, and approve it. What I want to show you as well is that if I go ahead and double click on this guy and open it up, I also have the same ability here. So regardless of where I land in the user interface, what I need to do next is right there at my fingertips. And maybe I'm not even on this page, but I'm actually looking at the details like we were just a moment ago. I can also see it here. So again, we're trying to put right in front of you what it is that you need to do so you don't have to fumble around a user interface to get to what it is you're trying to get done. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start this guy running, and then we're going to go look at some of the other details that we can look at. Oh, first of all, let's verify that it actually even worked. I know it worked. Why do I know it worked? Because the test passed, right? And if I have enough test coverage, then I can go ahead and automate leaving that stage. If I don't, then I definitely want to make that manual. I want to go in even after my automated test run some manual tests as well, and then go ahead and say, yes, I give it a thumbs up. But the only test that I wanted to run has actually passed, so I know the code should look right. So if I come over here to my dev stage, which is DLB demo dev, and I hit F5, you can see the text is different in two ways. The text itself is different, which means the .NET backend has been changed, and the text went from an H2 to a paragraph, which means the Java side has also been changed as well, and deployed as a unit. So now I'm going to go ahead and approve this since I know that it actually did work. I'm getting a little bit too many tabs open here. So let's say looks good in dev. And by approving this, it's going to start the same rinse and repeat workflow inside of my QA stage in here in just a moment. Now, our QA stage is slightly different. If we were to go and look at the anatomy of our QA stage, our QA stage doesn't do a deployment, but it does a swap, right? It's simply swapping from dev to QA. And then I still need to deploy my chef, though, because my chef is actually a completely different server, right? It's the second server that I brought up in PuTTY. That server still needs the bits. And it also needs a completely different list of URLs to be passed to it so that it gets the right information from the backend service. And then at the bottom here, instead of running the Selenium test, we're actually going to be running Coded UI test. We could run any test framework that you want. Just show me the PowerShell. Right? That's what I asked you guys to remember from the last one. For those who weren't in the last one, the mantra of release management is if you can show me a PowerShell, I can do it from release management. It is that simple. Show me the PowerShell, and I can do it from release management. What we're going to do on top of your PowerShell is give you the notifications, give you the approvals, give you the tight integration with team build, give you the tight integration with work item tracking. You're going to get all of this polish and all of these features put on top of the infrastructure that you currently have today. So be thinking PowerShell. If you do not know PowerShell, do not be alarmed. I did not know PowerShell that long ago. If you go to donovanbrown.com, click on the play icon at the top. It'll take you to my YouTube channel and go to playlist. There is a playlist. I didn't do this. I think the company's name is Sapien. Did a fantastic job of teaching you PowerShell, but for some reason didn't create a playlist. So I created a playlist of their stuff. And it's 16 fantastic videos that will take you from knowing nothing to actually being able to do some really cool stuff with PowerShell. Okay? So if you don't know PowerShell, I highly encourage you to go and do that. I actually wrote this swap task. But if you were to go and add a new task here, you'll see that it looks and feels like it was brand new or part of the system the entire time. We're going to make this an extendable system for you. So when people come up to me and say, can you do SharePoint? I have some SharePoint people in the room. Can I do SharePoint deployment? You might not see it in the list, but that doesn't mean the answer is no. What do I have to do? PowerShell. Show me the PowerShell that I need to be able to deploy your web part, deploy your application, point your SharePoint configuration to my app running in PaaS or IaaS or somewhere else so that it can be sucked inside of my SharePoint. And when you do that, I'm going to show you how to do it with release management. Right? PowerShell is the key. I don't care what technology it is. I always ask them all the same questions. Can you show me a command line that does that? And they say, yep. I say, well, then the answer is yes. Let's go do it. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to package it up and make it nice and make it reusable. We're going to make it such that when you drag it onto the screen here and you click on it, you have this nice user interface that allows you to provide the variables necessary so that we can then drive that and make it reusable. Because every time I deploy it, I don't want to have hard-coded values in there. I want to be able to reuse it, which is what I've done here. I tell you exactly what Azure subscription to use, what website we're targeting, and which 2 slots I want you to swap. Right? It's just that simple. And we can have this all driven by what we call variables. Remember the tokenization? And we want to make sure that they're different for every environment. I can actually go and define them in several different locations. So here, I can go and say, let's edit I options. And then I can come here to variables, and voila. Those are the values that I need to be set in that properties file I showed you if you're in the QA environment. They're stored here with the environment itself. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, Donovan, I don't want to have to copy and paste these variables when they're global and they actually apply to all of the different environments. We thought about that one. So what we allow you to do is not only at the stage level or the environment level, but here as well, be able to come up and define the variables at a global level for this release. This is the username and the password or the connection string that's going to be used throughout all your environments. And I don't want to have to type it over and over again. This is going to make maintenance very, very easy. You'll also see that there are padlocks on the right-hand side. Why? Because some of this information is protected. Some of it's secure and needs to be encrypted so that prying eyes that don't have the business seeing it don't have to see it. So this will allow you to be able to encrypt passwords and make sure you secure it such that only people who have the rights to be able to change it can actually change that information. Okay? So variables are a very powerful concept. We also have the concept of an artifact. For those of you that are use the current system, an artifact is a component. It's the best one-to-one mapping. I actually have a series of blog posts in the can right now from the months I spent playing with this one on what it's going to take to map your mind from what we gave you before to what we're going to today. I just don't have permission to publish them because it doesn't exist yet. But I've already been writing them. So you're going to see a huge number of published blog posts on donovanbrown.com as soon as this stuff goes live, because I've already been preparing them. Because I know what I had to, I asked a lot of questions of the product team on, well, what does this mean? Why did we change this word? And what does it map to in the old system, so that those who are familiar with the old system are going to be able to quickly come up to speed. And I've written down those notes so that I can share them with everyone as soon as this goes live. So what's going to happen here in the second is you should see yet another screen pop up behind us, but that screen is actually going to be running Internet Explorer and our coded UI test to prove that this stuff actually works in that environment as well. Voila, it's like perfect timing, like I meant to do that. Perfect. So that was coded UI versus Selenium. Setting them up was exactly the same. I have to be perfectly honest, setting up Selenium was a little easier, and the test was far more resilient. So we got a lot of work to do, in my opinion, on the coded UI part. Other than that, we are now going to get another notification saying, okay, Donovan, do you want us to release it from here and then promote it even further? So I think now we have about 18 minutes, and it is a free-for-all for any questions that you guys wanted to ask. So find the mics for me, guys. Let's find the mics so that everyone can hear these things. Come on. We have plenty of time. Go ahead.
On the deferral, when you defer the release, can you go back in there and like cancel it or defer it later?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely do that today in our current system as well. It will have to be supported in our future one. I say I need you to do it Friday at 5 o'clock, and holy crap, we didn't get our testing done in time. I can go back and find it and reschedule it. Absolutely. You were next.
On the chef stuff,
yes.
Do you understand cookbooks and cookbook versions that you can set within?
We actually do. So if we were to go back over here to my chef section here, you would be able to see that I have my different environments. And on my environments, I'm able to look at all the different attributes that I passed, because these are the ones that I just passed off for this one. And I also have the ability to look at my cookbooks as well. So the one I'm looking at here is my web application. And you see all the different versions I've uploaded. And then also my cookbooks and recipes are in here as well. So I'm literally just running this recipe against that particular environment. So it's associated to the environment and the node. And I just simply poke the node and say, go run all of your latest cookbooks.
But how in your release manager's task do you say that you need to go to version 3 of?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So the way that we did that is in our actual recipe here, we're telling it where from our blob storage to pull, that's the version of it. But we're not actually controlling the version of the cookbook. We're telling it we want you to run the latest version of the cookbook. But you're saying you're going to want to be able to say, I want you to run not the latest version of the cookbook, right?
Yeah, because when you get to production, you need to tell production to go and upgrade to a specific version.
All right, so I don't think we have that one in there. You have an answer for that, VJ?
But it's not an attribute. It's different to an attribute in Chef.
Well, we can actually, what he's saying is that you can actually set attributes at several different layers inside of Chef, and I can set one at the actual environment level and say every node inside this environment better be running this version of the cookbook.
Yeah, I'll take it. It doesn't work like that.
You don't think that we can get that?
No, if you look at the...
Follow me over to the Chef Expo, because I want to hear, because that's exactly how we were going to do it. And if that's not going to work, then we definitely need to know that's not going to work.
Okay.
All right, great.
On the variables, in the environment, if you set an environment variable, can you point it at a global variable, like nesting variables? So you have something that's going to change globally, but it's needed as a variable in each environment. So instead of
You can use the global variables inside. So for example, the way the variables work is that they're just a little, there's a syntax that you use. So if I were to come here, and let's find one where I've used one. The syntax is basically $ storage account, for example, is a variable that I have defined at the global level.
okay,
So I don't have to repeat it at the node level to be able to use it in each individual environment.
So if you were setting up an environment and adding a variable that's being maintained by somebody at the global level, you can just put in that syntax.
Exactly. So this storage account is actually at the global level. I don't have to repeat it at the environment level to use it in the environment.
Good, thanks.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead. You can reset a global one. So what if I wanted to, I could have a PowerShell that set one of the variables, and that value would then carry forward to everyone else in that environment. So you'll be able to pass variables from one PowerShell to the other. Go ahead.
So earlier deployment dev and your chef server wasn't running. Is there a retry mechanism that you can add on?
Oh, so you're wanting to be able to restart it without me having to go in there and click the button and say
if you deploy
restart.
at 5 in the morning, you don't want to wake up and
True.
press the button.
I don't think there's not a restart today, but that's something we can definitely look at and adding ability to retry that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I have two questions. Does release management understand the concept of group managed service accounts?
And what?
So
what
like
are
if
gonna
you
do with
wanted to
them?
deploy a website with an application pool with specific credentials, could you use a group managed service account on that application pool?
BJ, what do you think about that? PowerShell to the rescue! Yeah, so I actually haven't tried that, right? So I have to go and have to. Yeah, I've done it and it does work. All right, perfect.
Okay, great. And the second question was, in the workflows where you set up who gets emails and
Sure.
whatnot for each release, can you change the name of those approvers? Like instead of pre-deployment step, could you change it to dev deployment or something like that?
No, okay, so the names of the stages or when they trigger is the same, right? So what you get to control is who is in here, but this fires before and after deployment, right? So all we're giving you is the point in times to which you can notify individuals, but the name of it is not controllable. You can't change that today. Were you wanting the email notification to say something different than it does out of the box?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So someone else wants that too? Custom emails would be great. Is that on the backlog, Vijay? It is? Okay. Over here.
In the previous version of release management, we can use some custom tools, not only PowerShell, to execute tasks before or after the deployment.
Sure.
Will still it be possible to have an executable or console program that will run before or after the deployment instead of PowerShell?
Well, the funny thing is we're going to tell you to use PowerShell to call that executable.
Yeah, but
Literally, it's going to be one line of PowerShell that says go call SQL package.exe passing in these variables.
yeah, but how does it work to deploy these tools now? Before, all the tools you put in the release management were already
Sure.
automatically deployed to all the servers. So how is that?
Perfect.
Does it
So the way
change?
that happens is when you get to install your own agent on any machine that you want, on-prem or in IaaS, you get to then install on that agent all the tools that are necessary for your particular deployment. We call those capabilities. So if you needed SQL package, for example, on the machine for you to be able to deploy, you'll be able to add to that agent that I have the SQL package capability. And then when you define your release management, you say, I demand that you have the SQL package capability before you find it. So when I go and look in the pool of agents that I can use, I will only pick an agent that has all of the capabilities that I've demanded that it have for me to actually run my deployment. That's going to work really easy on-prem because you have full control of the agent. Anything that I can copy and just expand like a zip file and be able to execute, we'll be able to do in the hosted as well, but you won't be able to run installers or MSIs on our hosted build agents.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I missed your earlier session, but are there any planned releases for release management on premises?
Oh, yes. There's going to basically be an update 1 of 2015. We already have it for 2013. We update on the online every 3 weeks. We update the on-prem every 3 months. So roughly 3 months after update 1, when you see it online, you're going to see it on-prem.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So we talked a little bit about the infrastructure provisioning.
Sure.
And I was wondering if you already have any blog or planning to write one on showing end-to-end basic structure, dev provisioning, prod provisioning, and the actual bits deployment, putting everything together?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of new movement there because we have, I don't know if you've been by the ALM and spoken to Claude, we have the Dev Test Lab. We also have lab management. We also have ARM. So we have lots of options right now for being able to stand up and provision an environment before we actually start deploying to it. So what I'm going to be working on when I move is figuring out what is the best strategy for doing that and which tools we're actually going to want to. And once I know the answer, I will blog the answer.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, what's the licensing for this if you're not using TFS or anything else?
Okay, so the way the licensing works is that you have to have license for the client tools, the actual access to the website for you to be able to configure it. There is no cost to deploy. So you can deploy to infinite nodes for the same cost as just getting access to the user interface. So you will need something like an MSDN, I believe it's premium or above, or I think you can also get the Test Professional SKU. That will give you access to the user interface, but then you can deploy to as many nodes as you want to.
So if you have an MSDN, you can install this on-premise?
Yes.
The UI?
Not this one yet, but you will be able to, yes. With MSDN,
Okay.
you will have access to this.
And a second question, do you show the agents anywhere?
The agent is that little guy in the back. Literally this guy right here, this is my agent that's running in the background. Where you saw all the windows pop up and all the text running,
Okay, I see.
that is my agent.
But in the UI, you're not showing your list of agents.
Oh, I'll see what you're asking. I'm sorry, man. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I can show you that. So they're basically called pools. So if I were to come back over here, I will be able to show you exactly what my resource pools look like. So here's my pools. Are going to show up over here in just a second when it loads. So these are my agents. Right? And to the point the gentleman asked about, these on the right-hand side are its capabilities. So I would make sure that it had the SQL package capability if I wanted to do SQL-like things with my deployment. And then I would be able to demand that on my release, and they will basically match. So for example, Azure PowerShell is a capability that must exist for us to do anything inside of our Azure PowerShell commandlets.
Cool.
So this is how it works.
Thank you.
Great question. Over here.
Are you going to have a central way to manage the agents as far as deployment to your different servers and stuff like that?
Yeah, so what we're going to have is the concept of a pool. And so this is what an agent pool looks like. So we have and it's no longer scoped to the collection. You don't have to glue them together. You can actually be able to reuse that pool across multiple of them, such that this pool of agents is going to be available to all of your team projects to be able to do their builds and to do their deployments.
So when you have an update to the agent, you just go here.
I see. The agents are actually going to update themselves in the future.
Oh,
yeah. So So once you install the agent and you connect it to your Team Foundation server, it will then auto update itself to the latest version.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Over here.
Two quick questions. Are admins accessing this site? What kind of licensing would they need? Would they need MSDN or would they?
Yeah, they will need the same licensing that I mentioned before. To get access to this, you must have an MSDN Premium or above, or your Test Professional SKU.
Okay. And this goes.
And I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. Only to orchestrate. If you're just an approver, you don't need any license whatsoever.
Right. Okay.
Right. So if you're just a stakeholder who's put in the name like I'm the approver, he doesn't need any license to approve. But you do need license to actually build the workflow and all that kind of stuff.
And when does these new bits go gold?
That's for you, VJ. He asked when are they going out.
In VSO in 2 months, and in on-prem in 2015 update 1.
Okay.
So did you say 2 months?
VSO.
All right,
2
VSO.
months.
I just wanted to repeat that for the recording because you're on the hook now. Now it's 3 months. All right, so 3 months of the official recorded value for that, and then 3 months later than that, we should be getting our on-prem over here. Go ahead.
So you talked about this being able to plug into other build systems. I'm just wondering whether you're able to use VSO Online from a build and release perspective to point to on-premise TFS. Given I don't want to move from a 2013 TFS, but I want to use the greatness in this.
Right, so you want to use our new release management, but you want to use our on-prem build server.
Well, the on-prem source control and...
Right, so he has an on-prem Team Foundation server. That's where all your build and source code is going to be, but you want to use all this cool stuff for your release. The answer is yes. You will be able to utilize this coolness as long as I can get access to the bits, right? Those are just going to be artifacts that I want to be able to pick up and then be able to move those through the pipeline.
But in terms of listing builds from an artifacts perspective,
so yeah, how are we going to do that one right there, VJ? So if I'm using our on-prem Team Foundation server, but I'm using RMO for my release, in the artifacts, how will I actually be able to see my, my build definitions? So it's going to be like the build external was today.
So I'd have to put like
gotcha
folder paths or something. I'd have to put some path access thing to tell you whether.
So you define your artifact,
bits
yeah.
are.
Or just, upgrade to on-prem when update 1 comes out.
As long as it's not like the last update 3.
Yeah, understood. I think you've been standing longest. Go ahead.
Do you have any, with the coded UI tests, are you excluding them from the test cases now?
Oh, okay, interesting. So the way I was able to run those differently than I did in my build, right? So my build only ran unit tests, but then I ran coded UI tests. That's actually a good question. So the way that I was actually able to do that is when I defined my run test, I actually gave it a filter.
Yes.
Yeah, so that filter is how I was able to control, I only want unit run during my build, but I want Selenium run in my dev stage, and I want coded UI run in my QA stage.
Yeah, but if I want to see my coded UI test in the test hub.
Oh, the results?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's already happening. So that's a good question, too. I should have shown that. So if we were to go back and look at my actual release, I can show you that output. So let's come to my dev environment. Actually, yeah, this should work, too. So here are my test results. So it's just like the coded UI. So I can actually go and look at all of the results for all of my coded UI tests that ran in that particular stage from this hub.
But not in a test plan.
Oh, I didn't actually use a test plan to actually architect this, right?
But if you want to have a test plan with test cases and you want to link them together with your coded UI tests, like we have in our infrastructure today. That's not going to be possible right now?
That will be possible. Right, so what VJ was saying is that the way that I did it was the easiest way possible. I didn't want to go through the gymnastics, but what you're saying is very valid. If I have a proper QA team, they are already going to build that test plan. They're going to want to be able to track the execution of the plan as a unit. And what we're saying is that that task just simply does not exist yet. But if that test plan already exists and has all the automation automatically associated to it, then we'll be able to say, that's the plan I want you to go execute in that particular stage.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question regarding the release pipeline.
Sure.
If you have multiple dev servers, you showed one in your example. If you have 10, let's say the requirement to go to QA is that you have been in at least one of those environments. How can I specify that in the pipeline? Octopus Deploy has this possibility.
Oh, you had to rub that in, didn't you?
Yeah.
You had to throw that little bit there out there in the end for me. That's a good question. So, VJ, I don't think we have that today. So you have 10 dev environments, and you're going to deploy through one.
Yeah, every developer can deploy to the dev environment that is available to them. And my only requirement is that to go to QA, you have to have been in at least one of them. So I don't want to create 10 release pipelines. That would be very
Yeah, it would be a maintenance nightmare. Right, so the goal is I have 10 dev environments. All 10 of them will funnel into the same QA environment.
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, we'll have to take that one back with us. You have something, VJ?
It's a longer answer. So.
Yeah.
So we have plans to basically support your release definition in a pipeline mode, which is what you have seen, sequential dev, QA, prod, and in what we call as a loosely coupled mode. Effectively, we have a bunch of environments. This is like, let's say, every QA person in your team wants to have one environment. We will have a release definition, which is a collection of environments. And that's more of a self-service model. A QA can come in and say, deploy the latest build to my environment. That's about it. What you're asking for is a combination of the two. Effectively, you want some loosely coupled environments, and then that funnels into, that's way down the backlog for us right now.
Okay. We only have 1 minute left, so go ahead.
If I can interject that issue, I addressed that in my environment by I had actually inside TFS. I currently only have 2 build definitions, but you could have a build definition for each of your devs, and then have a build definition that's for your release cycle to QA and so on and so forth.
Potentially, I think it might work, but I think it's a slightly different question than that one. But no, that's a good suggestion anyway. You had another question, though?
Yeah. So in the current product, if a particular task fails and I have a rollback scenario, regardless of where I put that task in the workflow, the rollback occurs. Is there a way to selectively say, I don't care if this particular task fails, don't roll back. So for instance, if it fails to send an email, if I have an email task at the end, it's going to roll back my entire application.
Gotcha.
And I'd rather it to just
You
fail
want
the
you
email.
want to be able to ignore that failure, or that failure shouldn't trigger a rollback in the
Right.
system. Is that on the backlog?
Rollback itself is not there in the new system. It's coming soon. But we already have the capability to say continue on error for a task, and that won't trigger the rollback.
Gotcha. All right, good. All right, guys, we're out of time, actually. So let's do this. For those who still have questions, please follow us outside. Vijay and I will answer them. Everyone else, thank you so much for coming.